Test the Speed Shop. Today we're going to give you guys an update on what's going on with the 360. We got it all tore apart. One of the spun number 6 rod bearing. The crank is screwed up. So we went down, what was it, on
Thursday.
Yeah, it went down Thursday. And we got a reman crank coming for it. And we took all the rods and pistons down because the one rod's going to have to be resized, and we're going to get the rest of them all checked out. And then we took the balancer and the flex plate down because we figured, well, while we got it all down there, we're just going to go have the whole assembly balanced because we're not sure what kind of problems we were having there. We had you had wiped out the bushing out of the front pump on the transmission.
Wiped out the front. Went to a show in Tennessee, and was coming back from Tennessee and wiped blew the front seal out of the transmission for some reason. We took the transmission out, took it to the shop, transmission shop, and they not only did it wipe the front seal was bad, the bushing and the torque converter was also bad, and that's kind of an unusual to see that kind of issues. So I had to buy a new torque converter, put a new bushing, and I had to have transmission resealed. And then after we put the transmission back together, put it back in the car. About 2 months later, the front, the harmonic balancer on the car started coming apart. Not sure what happened there. It was in good shape, but it was definitely coming apart. So I had to put a new harmonic balancer on it, and did that. And the car was fine for a while.
Yeah, until this.
And then yep, until I got ready to store it away for winter. I took it out for a run, and just going down the highway, and all of a sudden the oil pressure dropped down to about 25, 28. The oil pump gauge was not reading steady. The needle was fluctuating pretty heavy on it. So there must have been a lot of blow-by in the bearings. Oil was not getting good oil pressure, so I started to pull off the road, and then that's when the bottom end started knocking. Started hearing a low knock in the bottom end. That must have been the number 6 bearing starting to spin in the crank. So that's when I brought it back here, and we found out what was going on with it when we tore it down. So, and that was this past winter when all that happened. So there was a lot of unanswered issues with the balance. It sounded like there was some balancing, something wasn't balanced right, or not sure what was going on there. It just seemed like a lot of things happened from the transmission all the way up to the harmonic balancer until it finally, whatever happened inside.
It's probably a culmination of a lot of things.
Yeah.
So, but hopefully we can get this all resolved and straightened out. So, but that's about where we stand right now. So, but maybe what we'll do is we'll give you a little rundown of Tom's coronet while we're sitting here and we got some downtime. If you want to tell them a little bit about the car, Tom.
Yeah, it's a 1969 Dodge Coronet 440. Some people get confused about the 440 badge on the side of the car when they see it. It's just the trim package of the car. It's not a big. It's not a big block car. It was originally a 318 car when I bought it, and we found another motor. This 360. We built this 360 for it. The K-frame is big block K-frame. I can put a big block in this car if I want to, but it is some people get confused about it. They think it's a 440, but it's not. It's just the trim package of the car that you get. You get a base model, which is just your coronet. Then you get your next up is your coronet 440, which would be a little bit different trim package for your interior and stuff, depending on what you want back then. and then you step up from there to your Coronet Super B, and then on up to your RT from there. And those are all big block cars. So I bought this car in 2010, and it's been many years I've been wanting to get back into this hobby, and I usually was a little stumped on how to start, on how to get into the hobby again. And I always liked the Mopars, even though I'm a big Chevy guy, but I like the Mopars. I've always liked their body styles and their and the horsepower that they can make. So I met, where I was living at, I met a friend, Dave, who lived behind me at the time, and I knew he had, I didn't know at the time that he had muscle cars. I didn't get to know him until about a year or two after I was living in my house when he bought his house. And his son and my daughter hung out, so I got to meet them, and then I found out that I got to see his cars, his 71 Chevelle and his 70 Charger. And then it was some months later before I met Chris and got to see his Chevelle. And just hanging out with him a little bit at the time and gotten to know him. And they started explaining how they got into the hobby of restoring cars. Dave worked for a hot rod shop out in Arizona when he lived out there, and he did his Charger, most of the Charger work he did out there, restoring his Charger, which came out. Took him about 10 years to do. Very beautiful car, original 4-speed car. And then at the time, him and Chris were restoring his Chevelle in his yard, and I didn't even really know what was going on over there until I found out they had put his Chevelle together over there. And I got talking to them, got learning some things, and figured out that how to go about getting back into the hobby. And these two, Chris and Dave, have helped me learn the right way and the wrong way of getting into the hobby. And then when I found this car, they came with me and we looked it over, and we knew it was a good car to start with. It was all together. It wasn't in boxes. I can tell you, listening to Dave and Chris, the best way to get in this hobby, if you're really not too familiar with how to go about it, is if whatever kind of car you like and you want to get into, find one that is all together. And find one that's not in boxes, not blown apart. Don't believe the...
Don't buy a car that's not together. Or
don't...
if it doesn't run, it's not a big deal, but as long as it's complete.
As long as it's complete.
I've been around too many cars that were in boxes, and there's always something missing, and you don't know where anything went. So
we found this car. We went out and looked at it. It was all together. It had some issues. It had some... the kid that owned this car, he messed up some wiring on it. It didn't run very well, and but it was a good platform for me. It was I didn't have to go find a whole lot of parts for it, but because Mopars, we can tell you, it's a learning curve to find the parts for these cars. If you got to go find parts for these Mopars, it's a little hard. It's tough, and the price of those parts are going to be a little more than what you would find on the Chevrolets or the Pontiacs, Buicks, or whatever you might be into. But I know for the Mopars, it was a challenge on some of these parts to find. But Chris and Dave helped me learn it, and I've learned a lot. They've let me make mistakes and corrected them, and that's the way. It's the best way to do it if you're going to do it. I have a lot of experience in automotive mechanical stuff, and I know my way around cars pretty good. Not as much on the Mopars, but I've learned from Chris and Dave on a lot of things with them, and it's helped me out a lot. My experience ends at body and paint, so I'm hoping the body work on this car is hideous. It's not real pretty. It looks good from a distance as far as you can.
It probably looks good on camera too,
but when you're up close to it, this car's been painted 3 times. It was originally, it's originally supposed to be F8 green. This green is supposed to be a little darker. It's a little light, but it was original F8 green, and then somebody got it and painted it black and tried to clone it to a Super B, which a lot of these cars, when they get them as a Coronet, they clone them over to a Super B, which that's what I see a lot of, but I wasn't going to do that to this car. It came down the assembly line as a Coronet 440, and that's the way it's going to stay. And when we found it, it had been painted back to green, but it's not the original F8 green. It should be a little darker than what it is. But it needs to be stripped back down to bare metal because the body lines are real thick on this car. It should be sharp. And she needs to be stripped down and repaint it. And we're going to hopefully, I'm hoping to learn that. That's part of my whole thing of the hobby, was to learn the body work and paint. And Chris and Dave have been down that road. They've done their cars. And they're going to, hopefully we're going to get to the point, if I can keep a motor together, I'm hoping to get to that point where I can learn that part of the hobby, because I never got that far. I've gotten everywhere else. We were hoping to get there this year, but with the motor issue, it's going to probably set me back until next year to have this car stripped down and probably have it sandblasted or soda blasted, because the paint's so thick on it. We don't know what kind of body issues are underneath all this paint. I knew Dave's Charger had a lot of issues with his Charger when they got it stripped down. It had a lot of more body issues than what they had hoped, but it came out beautiful. We're pretty much sure we're going to be putting quarter panels on the back because the back corner of my glass on this car leaks. It's rotted out a little bit up there in the corners, which all these particular, the Coronets usually get that way on the back corners of your back glass. So we've already formulated a plan on how to fix that, because a full quarter comes with those corners already on it. So it's just much easier to hang new quarter panels on this thing than it is to patch these corners if they're rotted out real bad. We're really not sure, but that's what we're probably going to do. Which some people, if you don't, some people get squeamish about hanging metal on cars, but once you it's easier to take the metal off than it is to patch on these, especially on the Mopars, the way these body lines and the way they got these cars stamped out. But once you hang new metal on a car, I had to put a new floor in this car when I had it, and this is a unibody car. If you don't know what that means, this car doesn't sit on its own chassis. The body is the chassis. The floor is, and everything on this car is the strength of the chassis. When I cut the floor out, of this car, which was a learning curve for me, I cut the floor out, and I didn't have the car supported correctly when I cut that floor out, and the back end of the car sagged down to where the doors were actually touching against the fenders. So that was a big learning curve for me, to get the car properly supported before I cut that floor out. Once I got the car level again, and I put the floor in, and the floor has to be set in these cars correctly, because you got to weld, when you weld these floors down, there's support brackets underneath the car that the floor has to sit on, there's hundreds of spot welds on this floor, and you've got to put them all back in this car, because it's the strength of the car. It's part of the chassis. So you have, if you do it correctly, take your time cutting the floor out of these Mopars, and set the floor in them right, it comes out great. And in mine, it took me a whole winter, half a winter, to put my floor in, because it takes time. You got to cut it out and fit it in there. But once you put it in, it's not so. And put all the spot welds. You got to put all those spot welds back in. The floor come out great, and the car is straight. Didn't ruin anything. So that was a big learning curve for me and that was the thing with having Dave and Chris, to tell you, the guys have been there and done that kind of thing, to tell you how to go about it, and they, you know, helped me through all that. So it was fun. It was a good time. It wasn't so bad. It scared me a little bit when the car sagged down like that, but once I got the car correctly seated upright and put the floor went in there nicely. It was a pretty good. It came out really good. So Chevrolets and all that, you have chassis. You just take the body right off the chassis. So they're pretty much real easy to put a floor in them. The trunk pan and all that was great in this car. That was one of the biggest things of buying this car, because the trunk pan was beautiful. It didn't need no issue. It didn't have any issues whatsoever.
Well, let's show them around the car a little bit. Yeah, this is pretty much the way we had found it and had bought it. The way it sits right now. This is the paint that was on the car when we got a hold of it. Of course, there's no engine in it right now. But Tom repainted all inside the engine
Yes.
bay inside here.
Yeah, the first time I had the motor out, I repainted all the. That's the best time to do it, when you take a motor out. This is the time you want to dress the inside of your engine area. And I scrubbed it down and went to a paint shop, and they mixed up aerosol cans with the F8 green, which you can tell it's darker than the actual body, and it should be that color right there. And you see the 440 badge, Coronet 440 badging. That's just the trim package of this car. It's not the, even though it can be a big block car if it wanted to, because the K-frame can adapt to a big block. This is the interior.
Yeah, go ahead and open the door, Tom.
And this is a non-post car, and what that is that usually some of them will have a post that is right here on that rear window. Mine is a non-post car, which is a kind of a rare. The interior is all redone. I did that, except for the front seat. Front seat was already done. I did the back seat.
Tell them a little bit about your custom gauge cluster.
Yeah, I had the original gauge cluster, but it never would work right, and it's kind of expensive to have those refurbished. So I found another gauge cluster at a swap meet. I bought it. I took the guts out of it, except the inner framework, and then I cut a piece of metal and cut the holes out, and I installed all these custom gauges. I got these gauges, and I installed it over the winter and put them in, and it came out nicer than I thought it would. But I get a lot of comments about it because I didn't want to have gauges all hung underneath my dash, so that's why I put all mine inside another gauge cluster, and it's just the guts of it.
Yeah, all the paint on the doors and inside the jambs here that's all the original paint.
Yep.
Which is kind of amazing.
Yeah, you never usually
I don't know if we
see
can,
them this good.
I don't know if we can.
And if you see these doors, they still have the assembly marks.
Oh yeah, we
Still put on them. There's the assembly mark. When this car come down the assembly line, they painted the mark number on them of what car it's going on, and this car still has all that on here.
Yeah, it's probably the trunk, Tom. I know there's stuff in it, but
I gotta have keys.
oh, they're up there in the toolbox, aren't they? That's what Tom's talking about with the rear window. This is the issues we're going to have here when we're trying to do the body work.
Yeah, this is my vinyl top, which I don't I'm not a vinyl top guy. I don't really care for them. They're pretty, but they trap moisture in them bad. And the roof is not painted. It's just glued on here, so it's starting to bubble and rust it. So we're hoping to fix that and do away with the vinyl top. This car won't have a vinyl top on it, hopefully.
You got some more original markings. I think that's for the tire. I think that means it's a 7.75 white wall. Not sure.
That's probably right.
And we still have the original jack instructions. This is all the original paint underneath here.
Yep, which is the original F8. It's
the original trunk seal.
Yep.
And then this is the trunk. And unfortunately we have a bunch of stuff piled into it, but this trunk is all original.
Yep.
There's no patchwork here. This is the original trunk to this car, which is, again, pretty impressive.
It is.
Tom has repainted this.
Yep, I cleaned it out, scrubbed her down, and I went in here with the aerosol cans that I had made up for the F8 green and just sprayed her down. It was that, this trunk was that pretty.
Go ahead and close her up, Tom. Yeah, this car started out as a 318 904,
Yep.
8 1/4 rear, and now it's a 360 904 with a 8 3/4 rear with sure grip and 323s.
Yep, it's positive. Me and Chris found that.
Yeah, we found that at
Found the rear
Carlisle.
and everything. It took me many years to find it.
We found that at Carlisle.
Took 5 years to find a rear for this car.
Yeah.
5 years. That's how some of this Mopar stuff is, guys. It took us 5 years to finally find a rear and the center section to complete my drivetrain that I wanted to put in this car. And the 323s with a small block engine, I've always liked that combination of gears and small block. It works really well. It moves this car pretty good.
Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and we're going to get to some cleaning here. Well, here we are. We're getting everything cleaned up on the 360. Got all our bearings out, just tapping all our holes. Pulled all our oil plugs out so we can scrub everything down. Tell you what, Chrysler sure did do a boo-boo with the front ones with those other plugs. What a pain to get out. I don't know why they just didn't tap those. Oh, we're going to continue cleaning. Well, we got everything cleaned up. Got all our threads chased on for the cylinder head bolts, the oil pan. Got all our block plugs out. We're going to continue this a little bit later. Probably in a couple days here, we're going to go ahead and we're going to just run a light hone down through the cylinders just to clean them up a little bit, just to put some crosshatch back in them. And then we just got to wait for the machine shop to get all our stuff back. So, and then we got some other cleaning we got to do. We got the oil pan cleaned up, intakes cleaned up. I'm just going to have to do the cylinder heads, get those all cleaned up. So once we get all that stuff done, we still need to get parts back from the machine shop. So until then, we'll be seeing you.